In this chapter, I'm going to teach you my tips and techniques. These are things that I have learned over decades of baking cookies that are going to help you bake the perfect cookies time and time again. I'm here to answer some of those frequently asked questions, so let's dive in. Mise en place means put in its place, and this is a technique that I learned through working in professional kitchens. And it means that you gather all of your ingredients, you weigh it out, and you have it all set and ready to go into the mixing bowl or whatever you're mixing your cookies in. And that way you won't forget anything. One of the best things about doing a mise en place is that you're not running around while you're trying to mix your cookies. Everything is out in front of you. That way, if you're mixing up your dough, you won't overmix it because you're running around trying to gather your ingredients. It's all right there ahead of time. I have to say that I didn't do this when I was first baking. It's something that I learned in culinary school and then working in professional kitchens. At first, I resisted it, and now I find it really relaxing. It's just part of the whole gathering everything. And that way I can just relax and do my recipe. I'm not nervous about having forgotten something. All of those little bowls, having everything in its place, it's really satisfying. I would say one of the most common mistakes is that people don't take the ingredients out of the refrigerator fast enough so they aren't at the right temperature. Is the butter supposed to be at room temperature? Bring it out of the refrigerator for about an hour to let it warm up. Are the eggs supposed to be at room temperature? Again, bring them out about an hour before. Every recipe is going to be different. Some are going to call for cold butter, some room temperature butter, some melted butter. But you just want to know what the recipe requires so that you're planning ahead and you can put it in your mise en place. One of the things that I try to stress to people is using a scale, because when you're using cup measures, sometimes people use a heaping cup full of flour and it's too much flour and your cookies can be dry, or they don't fill the cup up enough and then your cookies will spread all over the place. One way to avoid that pitfall is to use a scale. I can't emphasize this enough. It's my absolute favorite tool in the whole kitchen because then you have consistency with your cookie baking. I'm going to show you what happens to your cookie if you don't fully incorporate all of the ingredients in your cookie dough. You have to wipe down the bottom of the bowl. You have to wipe off the paddle. Even if you have a rubber-edged paddle, you have to do it. And now I'm going to show you why. Because if that butter isn't incorporated into your cookie batter, this, my friends, is what could happen, because this just had butter that was not incorporated all the way into the dough. And so when it hit the heat of the oven, it just bled all over the tray. So they're still gonna be delicious. They're probably gonna be kind of crispy and chocolatey and tasty, but you're gonna wanna close your eyes to eat them because they're not much to look at. So if you don't mix in the butter and take that little extra step of wiping down your bowl, this is what could happen. One of the things that will help you bake consistently and evenly and make sure all of your cookies are done at the same time and look the same and bake at the same rate is to use a cookie scoop. You can absolutely do it with like a tablespoon or creating little balls of dough, but then they might not be the same size. So using a cookie scoop will make sure that your cookies are the same, they bake the same, they come out the same, and it's just one of these professional tips that I picked up in a restaurant that I will always, always use, and I highly recommend it. One of the questions I'm asked a lot is to chill or not to chill the dough. And I tend to chill most of my cookies. Now, something like a meringue cookie, you wouldn't want to chill that, but almost everything else, I do, especially chocolate chip cookies, because I think it just improves the flavor. You can bake them right away, but I recommend chilling them first. There's a couple of reasons why. One of them is to enhance the flavor and the texture of the dough, and the other is because I may not want to bake all of the cookies at one time, so I chill them, and then I can go from the refrigerator. Once the dough balls are solid, I can put them in a plastic bag and freeze them. But chilling them does so many things. What you're doing is allowing the flour to absorb all of the other ingredients. Vanilla and the eggs and the butter, they all marry together and just make a better consistency of your cookie. So the texture is gonna improve and the flavor. After you've mixed your dough, the butter is nice and soft. Sometimes you want that. Sometimes you want your cookie to spread, and so you'll bake it right away. But sometimes you want to chill the butter in the dough so that it won't spread as much when you put it in the oven. So once you put it into the refrigerator, obviously that butter is gonna chill and it's gonna solidify, and you're gonna have a different texture on your cookie. It's really important to know your oven. One thing that I always have is an oven thermometer, because some ovens can run up to 30, 40, even 50 degrees off. The other thing is to bake the cookies in the center of the oven if you can, because that's where the heat is the most even in the oven. Typically, ovens have two settings. You can either have regular heat, which is just what we call in the industry flat heat. So there's no wind. That's convection. Convection ovens have a fan going, and so it's creating wind. It's a really intense heat. I don't recommend it for cookies unless the recipe calls for that. So if you have multiple sheets of cookies, you're gonna slide your cookies in, and then we'll bake them, depending on the type of cookie. We'll probably bake them for about 5 minutes, and then we're gonna come back. Once they're baked for 5 minutes, we're gonna wanna rotate them because we have so many cookies, and the cookie sheets actually act as insulation from the other sheets. And so we wanna make sure that they're all baking evenly. So we take the bottom one, and then we slide them down, and the bottom one becomes the top. And you can even rotate the sheet so that the front and back have been rotated, because sometimes the back of the oven has the most intense heat. So rotating the cookies, if you have more than one sheet, is a really good idea to get a really consistently baked cookie. And the timing will totally depend on the recipe. One of my favorite tricks is to freeze the dough. That way you have cookies on the ready. Like whenever you're in the mood, whenever you have a craving, you can just pick a cookie out of the freezer and you can just bake one, or you can have them all made and ready to go if you're baking tons and tons for a party or the holidays. So all I do is put them into a Ziploc bag, and then I can just slip this right into the freezer. I just mark them, what's in there, the date, and then that can just go into the freezer. So you'll see I've got peanut butter cookies, I've got chocolate cookies. Usually a cookie will last for a month, even 2 months, if you have like a decent freezer that isn't going through the defrost cycle all the time. They'll last for a really long time. Depending on the kind of cookie that you want, like if you want a cookie that's sort of soft and fudgy on the inside, you can go straight from the freezer to the oven. You don't have to defrost them. If you want a cakier cookie, then you want to let them come to room temperature and then bake them. So depending on the texture you want is how you will bake them. So this is a trick I learned working in professional catering company, is to freeze the dough ahead of time. That way you can do all of your prep. You don't have to bake them all right after you've mixed them. And so this way you can store them and you can bake them when you need them. In this chapter, we learned all about the tips and techniques that are gonna help you make a great cookie, from getting your mise en place together to the temperature of ingredients, how to set up your oven, chilling your dough. I also taught you what happens to your cookie if you don't fully incorporate all of the ingredients. All of this is gonna help you make the best cookies you can. So I can't wait to see your cookies, and thank you so much for joining me.